with another falconry video. Today's video, I'm going to be talking about the Sky Trials. Now, the Sky Trials are a concept and a certain way of flying falcons. And it's something that was started here in Utah many years ago by Gerald Richards. And this year is the 50-year anniversary of the Gerald Richards Sky Trials. Now, it's been called many things over the years. It's been called the Pigeon Derby, the Gerald Richards Sky Trials, the Utah Sky Trials. But for the 50-year anniversary, we kind of wanted to promote it. So this video, I sit down with Patrick Shane, who was a good friend of Gerald Richards, and interview him. And he's going to tell us more about what the Sky Trials are, how they came to be, and a little bit more about Gerald Richards himself. So listen up. I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope you learn a thing or two. I think it's really good to understand our roots and understand how this amazing form of falconry came to be.
My name is Patrick Shane, and I want to give you a little history for anyone that's interested, and I think there might be some that are really interested in how falconry in Utah got started and the history of the Sky Trials, and of course Gerald Richards, who started the Sky Trials, and how that all happened and how it's morphed into what it is today. And so if you go way back, I was born in Provo. My doctor was a falconer that delivered me, and Dr. Stevens, and his good friend J. Cly Ward was a jeweler in Provo, and those were the first two falconers that anyone knows about in Provo in the 1940s. And so in 1946 I was born. My mother told me all about it, and so falconry in Utah started a long time ago, and basically back then and for many, many years you didn't need a license, falconry in Utah or anywhere in the United States. And when I came back to school, I came back on a track scholarship to Brigham Young University. Wanted to go to Berkeley. Mother wouldn't let me do that. She was a strong Mormon lady that didn't think her son ought to go to Berkeley back in the 60s, and that was a great place to be. So I had a full scholarship there. I had to give that up, and she got me set up at BYU, and they took care of my education, so I came to BYU, and it turned out great. But I spent the first couple years out of falconry because of schooling, and I trapped my first bird when I was 11. Back when, again, you'd go to the library. If you want to be a falconer, you'd go to the library and you'd get yourself a National Geographic or the Art and Practice of Falconry and read, but there was nothing there. So you had to kind of figure it out yourself. Anyway, I started falconry in Utah in 1968, I think, 67, 68, and it turned out that through falconry, I met Gerald Richards. I actually had a goshawk I was flying in the backyard, and a Cooper's hawk apparently flew, and he was out for a walk. We didn't live too far apart, had no idea who we were, maybe a half mile maybe, and he was out for a walk with his wife, LaVon, and he heard an accipiter complaining. And of course he knew what that was. He went followed it through the yards and found my goshawk in the backyard perched out on a bull perch. And I wasn't home. So he came back later, knocked on the door, and introduced himself. That's the first I met Gerald Richards. And so we became great friends. Later, he wanted to breed kestrels and do that kind of stuff, and he flew falcons, and he and I were great friends. And then as we started a club back then with a few people, and it was Gerald Richards, Al Ross was one of the guys about my age, and Gerald's, and then Ken Tuttle, I think, was our first president. And our club today has continued since those early days when we started the Utah Falconry Association. And I think Ken Tuttle was the first president, and maybe 1 or 2 years, and then I think Gerald was for a couple of years, and Joe Terry and some other people, but that's how we started. Basically very small. There was a dozen people in the room, not even that, and we'd go out and have a field meet every year in like maybe March when the weather warmed up a little bit, but started real slow. And so Gerald and I became very good friends. He actually worked at BYU, and I ended up as a student there, but I ended up also later going and coaching there, and that was what I did for 36 years as an athletic coach there. But he and I became real close friends. and Ricardo Velarde, the three of us would spend a lot of time together flying birds and talking falconry, and he went to a NAFA meet. This is all history you can read about in I think it was Colorado, and saw Ed Pitcher, who was an Idaho falconer who had a prairie falcon. Crystal, I think, was the prairie falcon's name, that would take thermals and soar into the heavens and go up 1,000 feet or higher. Sometimes you couldn't see it much over that. If the sky were blue, cloudy sky made it easier to see. And he would throw out a pigeon. And Gerald just absolutely was mesmerized by what he saw. A bird flying that high, coming down on a pigeon, which got away. And back then, the NAFA meet were having these field trials where they would have a person fit, they would try to hunt, and they would hunt and catch game with all kinds of birds of prey, rabbits and pheasant and whatever. But they had a demonstration where falconers would go out into the field. Their bird would go up in a waiting on. Sometimes 200 feet seemed like a high height back then, and or 150 feet. And they had in a bag they had a duck or a pheasant, sometimes a chucker. And when the falconer said serve it, they'd throw it out of the bag. Now, it didn't fly very far. Usually, it would land because they were kept in a pen, so they weren't wild. And the falcon would turn over and come down and hit it, rarely in the air, usually on the ground, and everyone would ooh and ah. And that's what they did for a while, and that got some bad feedback from the community. People that would come out and watch didn't like that, and our national club, NAFA, decided to get rid of that because it was bad optics, and they should have. It was not such a good idea. But that's when he saw Ed didn't want to do that. He said, I'd rather kill one. How did that saying go? I'd rather kill one pheasant or duck from 1,000 feet than 1,000 ducks from 10 feet or 100 feet. And he was right. It was so much more exciting. And so Gerald got the idea of putting on, because we'd been having these meets from the club where we would kind of do what they did. We'd hunt, and it was hard. By then hunting was pretty much over, so we'd throw out a few things. He got the idea of the Sky Trials from watching Ed, who wasn't doing Sky Trials. No one was doing that. He got the idea. Would change what we were doing, what he was doing, and what we were doing as a club to, he called it the Pigeon Derby. And I went to the first one and all of those, and it was I won't go into the details, but it wasn't what it is now. And slowly he developed the idea of transforming that club hunting day to the Sky Trials, Pigeon Derby, and then it became Sky Trials, and it just continued to develop to where it became just this awe-inspiring thing. And Gerald was an educator, and he wanted people to know about falconry, to educate people about falconry. And there was a part of the club that didn't want anyone out there except falconers. And he would get scout groups and all kinds of people to come out and spread the word. And so the club was kind of divided, and some didn't want to do that because of PETA and some other things, thought that would kind of shut us down. And but he wanted to educate, and so he slowly developed the Sky Trials, Pigeon Derby Sky Trials, into this event that it is now, and it kind of lost its glory days when we'd have hundreds of people, and it was really amazing. But a big part, one of the biggest things that changed it all, that made this all possible, was telemetry. And back in the day when it first came out, we were all excited, and what they had was junk. It didn't work very well, but it was better than nothing, because we'd always lose our birds. I lost every bird I had. Red-tails, kestrel, well, not kestrels, but red-tails would all eventually go up and soar and get so high and so far away, and sometimes they would come back and sometimes they wouldn't. And eventually you'd lose them all. Same with prairie falcons. You'd get up and eventually they'd go off and hunt something and you didn't have any way to find it, and you eventually lose them all. So telemetry changed the game for falconry and for something like the Sky Trials. Robert Bagley came along and found a niche where he could develop probably the state-of-the-art best telemetry that's ever been done out there. And so there are others that do a good job too, but he was really instrumental in developing telemetry to a whole different level. And so that's part of it. And so it's now, and now of course the club puts the Sky Trials on, but after Gerald died, the club, and the president was Robert Bagley, and Joe Terry was one of the officers, and Brad Townsend. They were the three officers, and they kept the Sky Trial going for a couple years, and until their term expired, and they asked me to put on at the Marriott Hotel the big banquet, and it was huge, and it was amazing, and we honored Gerald for what he had done, and then when their term ended, the new president was supposed to, the presidency was directed by the new president, was supposed to put on the Sky Trials. And they had no idea how much work and how hard it would be, and how you had to start early and network and get volunteers and delegate. And so as it turned out, it got closer and closer, and we wanted to know what was going on, and they decided, the president decided he wasn't going to do it. And I thought, no, that'd be a shame. This history of the Sky Trials is going to end. So I jumped in and decided to put it on. But a one-day meet, we went out to past Cedar Valley. We used to do Sky Trials there a lot, but out into the Great Basin and kind of where it is today. And it was really windy. Wind was blowing about 30 miles an hour, and we only had 6 people that were willing to fly. And as it turned out, it got so windy, only 2 of us flew. And it wasn't very good because of the wind, but we had it, kept it going. And then I put it on for about 10 years, and it was a labor of love. And finally, I got promoted at the university, and instead of having 30 students that I was responsible for, with just cross-country women, I had the whole track team. I had 100 athletes and 3 coaches, and all of a sudden, I had no time to put on the Sky Trials. So I found a new, if you remember Princess Bride, the movie, I found a new Dread Pirate Roberts to take over the Sky Trials, and that was Shane Clark, who was my apprentice when he was young, when he came to BYU. And I apprenticed him, and he was perfect. So he put it on for many years. And then there came a point where things happened where he didn't want to do it anymore, couldn't do it anymore, and so I think Steve Chingren he changed it to the Pigeon Derby, and put it on one year, but not out in Rush Valley where we've been having it. Put it on somewhere and had the soup night at Marshall thing up there, which is one of the things Gerald did. Soup night at his house, which is great, but didn't want to do it after that because it was a lot of work. And I thought, okay, I can't let this thing die. I'll do it. So I did it one last year, about 2014 or 15 or 16, I don't remember. But and they're having trouble getting enough people to make it work. To get 6 or 8 falconers that would fly a bird. And I think we had like 14 or 16 birds flown. Some of them were the same person flying 2 birds, but it turned into a really good meet. And then I thought, I'll just do it 1 year because I still have the same responsibilities at the university. So I did it 1 year, and then wanted the club to take over. And I think we had COVID came along right after that, and I think we had a young man that was willing to put it on and did for a couple years, but I wanted the club to be way more involved, and so that fortunately the club has taken over that and is going to be doing that and keep the tradition of the Utah Sky Trials and Gerald's wonderful tradition alive. And so hats off to the club. Thank you for those of you in the club that it's a labor of love that do all that you do to keep falconry alive and make it fun for everybody and educate the young people and make it grow. Okay, I'd like to give you a little information about Gerald Richards, the man. Who is Gerald? Where did he come from? What's his history? How did he get into falconry? And so I'll give you a little history. He was born in Utah, came from the kind of Salt Lake area, out in the country kind of there, had a large family. He was a great athlete, track and field athlete, long jumper, 20-foot long jump. He was a really good athlete. He was about 5'7", 140 pounds and wiry and just stronger than heck. So he was a really good athlete and really smart. And he ended up loved biology, and he got interested in falconry and pigeons and all of that kind of stuff at a young age. And he ended up going to BYU and getting his master's degree in biology. And he was very much into that. And he got hired at BYU, and he worked in their biology department in the labs up there, and met Clayton White, who's one of the peregrine experts and had taught there for many years, and was very much involved in helping get the reintroduction of the peregrine when it, through the DDT problems where we lost peregrines, helped get that back, and had lots of birds that came in for quarantine up in the top floors there in the science building. But Gerald worked there, and I first met Gerald. I didn't even know who he was until he knocked on my door. And he was out for a walk. I mentioned earlier, out for a walk with his wife, and noticed that I had a goshawk in the backyard. And we got to be friends. He didn't live that far away. And a little bit after that, another friend, Ricardo Velarde, who was an Olympic diver in the Olympics in Mexico City, came to BYU on a diving scholarship. And the three of us would just go out and go on camping trips and go trap hawks and falcons and hunt and fly our birds, train our birds. Gerald had a big pigeon loft. We used that. We'd go out and look for prairie falcons and do all of that. And so Gerald became really interested in breeding falcons and kestrels. He decided to breed kestrels. And back then, that's before when we all started. You didn't need a license, and slowly you needed a license, and they had regulations. But he started that stuff, and he decided to get a bunch of kestrels and breed them, and he thought he would. It would cost him money to feed them stuff. He'd sell some, and they didn't. The government didn't appreciate that, and kind of slapped him a little bit and said, you can't do that. And so to be at the university and not be a felon, he had to give that up. But it was a dream of his, and his heart was pure. He had the right idea, and he wanted to help people get kestrels and do that kind of stuff. But he ended up building and breeding peregrines and all kinds of birds, and became, I think he was, Ken Tuttle, I think, was our first president. And I think Gerald was the second or third president in our club. I'd have to look. Club probably has all that stuff. But Gerald became our club president and helped our club grow. And of course, he became famous because he started the Utah Sky Trials. And it was a pigeon derby to start with, and it slowly morphed into the Utah Sky Trials. And he'll always be famous on that idea that Gerald had for flying falcons very high with not a pheasant that can't fly or a duck that can't fly, but a homing pigeon that knows what's going on, and they almost all get away if they're well trained and it's done right. And so he had that idea, and that idea of the Sky Trials using a homing pigeon, well-trained, smart homing pigeon, and high-flying falcons caught on. And we became famous here in Utah and the Great Basin. People would come from all over the world, from countries everywhere to watch. And they were blown away by, if you come from Europe and some of those places, Japan, they've never seen anything like what we have here, where the expanse of country just goes forever. There's not homes everywhere and stuff. And they couldn't believe there's that much free land you can go out and do falconry. And so they would come, and that idea caught on, and Spain decided to put them on. And I remember Ricardo and I were invited over, and they flew us over there, and we ended up taking care of us for a week. It didn't cost us any money, and they had Sky Trials in Spain, and they still do. It became real popular, but there they dressed up ties and hunting clothes, and the mayor of the city that they were having it in, they had a big tent. He would make a big speech, and everyone would have a nice dinner and wine and cheese and so forth. The falconers would go out and fly their birds, and everyone would watch. Most of them weren't falconers, and they were just there for the spectacle of the event. It was very interesting. So that's now they have them all over the world now. I'd like to talk just briefly about. I think I've mentioned my introduction into falconry, and I firmly believe that something is unique about young people or anybody that gets into falconry. When they see a bird of prey or a falcon and hear about it, maybe in the wild they see a falcon or they hear about it, something kind of connects in their brain. I think that we're born falconers, and when we see it, we're all in. It's like a duck to water. And so if you talk to falconers, a lot of them will say, I don't know why, but I'm connected to this sport. And so it isn't so much a love for just falcons, because falconry, as you open it up, becomes a way more than just hunting birds or keeping a bird and doing things with it. It becomes a connection to nature and conservation and protecting, like bringing the peregrine back from extinction almost. That were falconers that did that. And so we need to be vigilant. Now we have laws. Back in the day, we didn't have to have a license, and you could have eaten all the birds you caught. No, and of course we wouldn't. But I would like to see the falconers today open up and help young falconers. Education, spread the word, help each other. Back in the early days when you didn't have computers and cell phones and all that kind of stuff, you didn't know who the falconers were. Now we do. We can get online and computer and find everybody, but we need organizations like clubs and national groups, the NAFA people, that promote falconry and the husbandry of keeping birds and in a safe and humane way and following our dream to be falconers and have that connection with birds of prey, which are absolutely unique to everybody that does it in their own different way, from kestrels to red tails, as people start off, goes on to falcons and goshawks and eagles and owls and whatever your niche is. But I would like to see our clubs, and we have a great one here in Utah, and there are clubs in every state in the United States and a national group. I'd like to see us do more community type service, putting nesting boxes for kestrels and education and giving back to the community and educating people, because hunting and the idea of falconry is hit a point where people didn't like that idea, but that's what birds do to keep alive and eat. And people have been flying birds from Mongolia, where they hunt all kinds of game, including a wolf that's smaller than the one we have here, and it's their heritage. And Genghis Khan had birds, and during the Middle Ages, when they had the Holy Wars, the Arabs and the Christians would come, and they were trying to fight over Jerusalem in the Holy Wars. They actually had a timeout. They would stop during a particular time of the day when everyone had to stop fighting, so that the people that had falcons, the leaders, and kings and princes and noble people, could fly their birds. And if the bird went into the other camp, the other side, they had to leave them alone while they retrieved their bird, their falcon, and vice versa. And so the rich history of falconry goes back so far when you look at the history. And so what we want to do is honor that and keep that, and realize that, okay, it's all right if someone is against killing or against someone hunting. You can respect their opinion and see their point of view. or against trapping a bird that should be wild, and now we've got it in captivity, and they're against that. I can see that point of view and appreciate it, but I'd like them to be able to see my point of view, that if I'm humane and I take care of the bird and I know what I'm doing, and we catch birds, and especially young birds, we save their lives. 80% of them die the first year. So if we trap a bird or take it out of the nest or trap it, we can keep it alive and get it healthy and teach it how to do what it needs to do. Instincts are really there for the bird, and we release our birds, and there's a bird that made it, that we help make it. So there's a relationship between differing opposing points of view and what we do, and we need to come together and accept the fact that we may not always agree, but we can respect each other and how they feel, and hope that they'll do the same for us. So that's what I'd like to see come out of all this. Falconry was a great thing for me growing up in the 50s, in the 1950s and 60s, and how I got started and what I've done, and people like me have done, and would like to see this great love for birds of prey, falconry, continue in a meaningful and useful way that respects falconry and nature and other people's opinions, and we all are able to enjoy it. The 50th year of the Utah Sky Trials, Pigeon Derby Utah Sky Trials, the Gerald Richards idea that is now 50 years this year coming up, and what that means, and kind of what I think about that, and how wonderful it is. Back when Gerald started the Sky Trials, he would have people over to his home. I remember that I would go over with his wife, and we would talk about the Sky Trials, and he'd plan it out, and it was a pigeon derby to start with, and then I'd go help him do it every year, and it slowly developed into a bigger and bigger thing, and people from California started coming. Became just this huge thing. We'd have 25 birds being flown, and in fact, we get too many birds where we couldn't fly them all. And he would have at his little humble home in Provo, he and his wife would put on what's called soup night. So the Sky Trials was once just a one-day thing for a while, then it became a two-day event. But the day before the Sky Trials, usually on a Friday, Levon would put on a dinner called Soup Night, and everybody that was going to fly would crowd into the kitchen and living room, and Gerald's were standing room only, and we'd have soup. And it was a tradition. It was a wonderful thing, and got everyone together, and then we went out the next day, and I remember getting up early and going out and helping him with the Sky Trials, and it was a wonderful event. He wanted to have a banquet, which he did every year, and gave out the awards and had some prize money, and it became a big thing. I mean, it was at some point it became a little too competitive, and that kind of got in the way. People are highly competitive and that do these kinds of things, and so there were some hurt feelings occasionally, but overall it was a good thing. And then afterwards, you're just exhausted on Sunday. I would go over, have breakfast with Gerald and his wife, and they would have all the money from the raffle and from all the stuff, and they wanted to have it up front and make sure that people knew that they were being good stewards with the proceeds from what was made from Sky Trials after giving it away. And so we'd sit there for about 4 or 5 hours and count everything up and look where money went, what it cost, and basically Gerald would lose money every year. and eventually there came a time when the raffle got bigger and there was a little money to be made, and that would be we thought we should give some to the club and do this and do that, but people have no idea how much work was involved in that sort of thing. It was just amazing. And so for many years, that's how Gerald did it until he was out flying his red tail, and he had a young neighbor that was a young lady that, I don't know, she was about 8 or 9 or 10, maybe 12. I don't remember how old, but good friends of the family, and she would go with Gerald because she wanted to be a falconer. And he was out in Cedar Valley with his red tail, and he wanted to fly it in the Sky Trials. And he would go up in a soar, and he would try to serve it pigeons, and it went up in a soar. And of course, red tails in March aren't real hungry, and it went really high and then drifted off. And so Gerald had to go up, hike up this small hill, which maybe was 300, 400 feet up, and retrieve his bird. He had telemetry on it, and the young lady came along, and Gerald had a heart attack, and he died up there in Cedar Valley on top of this hill. I go up there once in a while just to think about him. But so anyway, the young girl, he said, go get some help. And so she went back down the hill and finally found somebody, and he had passed away. That was such a hard thing for us all to realize that this legend, Gerald Richards, was no longer here. And sad, very sad thing, a tough thing to do. There were so many people at his funeral. Most of them falconers. I mean, it just packed this. They had it in a church, and I think there were 500-600 people that just packed in there, wanted to be part of his, be there to honor Gerald and tell Levon thanks. So he passed away, and of course the club now puts it on, and the club, when he died, were the first people to put it on. Robert Bagley and Brad Townsend and Joe Terry put it on for a couple of years and did a great job, and to keep the Sky Trials and the history of it all going.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope you learned some new things. I think it's really interesting to hear it again firsthand. So if you enjoyed this video, if you could hit subscribe, I appreciate it. But also down in the description of this video, I'm going to have some links. I'm going to put a link down to this year's 50th anniversary of the Gerald Richards Sky Trials. So if you want to go, if you want to attend, then you'll have the details on how to do that. But also, I'm going to put a link to a DVD that you can purchase from Marshall Radio Telemetry, which gives a much more in-depth interview of Gerald's life from the people who knew him best. And I think it's a very good thing if you have that. I know media is constantly changing, but it's an amazing DVD. I have a copy myself, and I love it. But if you want to support that, feel free, follow that link. But otherwise, I hope you learned something new, and I hope you enjoyed this video. And as always, happy hawking.